Hi, my name's Dave Kelly. I'm the chair of the Pioneer Park Coalition. I'd like to welcome and thank the reporters and journalists who have gathered here today to support us. I'd also like to thank all the concerned residents and citizens that are behind me that have made helping the homeless and also creating a safe environment for the city a top priority. So I'd like to say thank you to them. And I'll turn the time over to Scott Howell.
Thank you, Dave. And I'd reiterate, thanks for all the press for being here this morning. I'm Scott Howell, former legislator. A long time ago when there were dinosaurs up there at Capitol Hill. There still might be some there, actually. But I've been involved in homeless for over 30 years, and I've always looked for something that would change the face of homelessness to make it better for our citizens. Today is a historical day. Earlier this morning, President Wayne Niederhauser, former Senate President Wayne Niederhauser, and now the state homeless coordinator, announced that there is a new program, a new process to deal with homelessness. He announced this at the League of Cities and Towns. There were three things that I want to emphasize about what President Niederhauser said. Number one, unsanctioned camping is the worst option for homeless. It's the worst option. Number two, he acknowledged also that all of the homeless population is not ready for housing alternatives, and it must be a solution that includes wraparound services. These are very basic principles that the Pioneer Park Coalition has initiated from the very beginning. Historical day in the sense of what is compassion for our homeless? Is it to allow them to camp on the street, go into bins, gather food, have people throw them out a sleeping bag, have people throw them out a tent, and then occasionally get some sandwiches? Is that compassion? What do we do for the terrible situation that these individuals are in? Compassion, in my mind, is not to have them on the streets. Put them in a secure, safe environment where they can get medical attention, they can get mental health, and the answer to that right now is go to jail. Now, someone out there is going to say, oh, Scott Howell just wants to take all the homeless, put them in jail, and that's the solution. No. It is much better that we take care of our homeless by putting them in a safe, secure environment where they can get attention and have 3 meals a day and be able to know that they're going to wake up in the morning without someone hanging over them or someone robbing them or someone sexually abusing them. So today, we are proud to be able to announce a grand plan that has been in the work for many, many months. Our speakers today are a variety of subject matter experts when it comes to homelessness. We'll first hear from, when you get old, you can't read what it is there. Jim, are you first? No. Oh, Nicole. Sorry about that. The first we'll hear from one of the original members of the Pioneer Park Coalition, who used to have her retail outlet right there in that building. After numerous experiences of dealing with homelessness, from performing oral sex in front of her building with a homeless couple, to naked men and women running through her operation while she's trying to sell a dress to a woman who's planning on getting married. After Nicole, we'll announce the rest of it. Nicole Thomas, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Scott, and I'm really happy to be here. Like Scott said, I did choose to leave downtown Salt Lake and relocate my business because of the perpetual issues that I was having over the years. I'm happy to be here today because I do love downtown Salt Lake. It's been near and dear to my heart, and I've either lived downtown or worked downtown for the past 23 years. And it was a really bittersweet decision for me to leave, and it's something that I still feel very passionate about. Salt Lake City's approach to homelessness and crime is failing. Change must happen now. As business owners, downtown residents, and concerned citizens, we can no longer remain silent and watch this great city deteriorate. We have lost faith in the strategies that promise something better. Millions and millions of dollars are being thrown at our homeless crisis. But more money won't fix the problem, nor will it improve the lives of our most marginalized citizens. The reason: merely housing homeless who have problems like drug and alcohol addiction, mental illness, and other behavioral issues will not work. Not even if politicians say that they have wraparound services to be part of the plan. Cities across America are living proof of this. Clinging to this wrong-headed approach will only make the problem grow. And the city's game of chess with homeless encampments isn't working. You can't take tent cities and disrupt them and then reestablish them in another place. This doesn't change lives. They only breed crime, dirty needles, sexual assault, human waste, and garbage. Emergency homeless shelters or apartments for the homeless in Salt Lake are currently some of the biggest magnets for crime in the city, according to 2021 police statistics. The facts tell the story. The police were called to downtown women's homeless shelter 1,677 times. That's shocking. No other place in Salt Lake got more phone calls. It wasn't even close. The homeless shelter is supposed to be a place of refuge and healing. Instead, it's a breeding ground for drugs, prostitution, and crime. The same could be said for the Gail Miller Homeless Resource Shelter in the Ballpark neighborhood. It was the third leading source of calls for the Liberty Division last year. Of the top 30 locations for police calls in 2021, the majority of the issues were associated with homeless shelters, homeless apartments, low income, affordable housing, or facilities like motels that are caught in this web. Homicides are up 54% over the 10-year average. Non-family aggravated assaults are up 36% over the 10-year average. Burglaries are up 19%, and there were 239,002 calls to police last year. That's a 15% increase over 2020. That's more than one call for every man, woman, and child in Salt Lake City. What works? A comprehensive program that combines housing with personal accountability, wraparound services, law enforcement, full statistical transparency that not only identifies who is being served, but also independent audits that show that these providers are actually working and changing lives. We've been warned by those inside the homeless industry that setting such a high standard will be met with resistance, and every effort will be made to keep the status quo. They tell us there is too much money, too much politics, and too many egos for change to happen. We're ready for the pushback. The critics and the avalanche of insiders who don't want to consider better alternatives. Simply put, the time for empty promises and short-term victories is over. The clock has run out. We don't want Salt Lake to become like Portland, Seattle, Los Angeles, Chicago, or New York. We believe in programs like Haven for Hope in San Antonio, Community First Village in Austin, and programs right here like the Other Side Academy, Life Start Village, and Switch Point. Salt Lake can control homelessness and the vicious cycle of crime associated with it. We need a new direction and the will to invest in that new direction, and the time is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Our next speaker is Jim Buchanan, and many of you might know Jim. He was the state legislative auditor general for the legislature. He worked there 34 years, and he has had more experience with homelessness than probably anyone in our world. He's done all the audits, and we are fortunate when he retired, he joined the PPC, and he's the master brain behind the Graham Plan that I think you all have copies of. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Jim Buchanan.
Thank you, Scott. Scott's a little more generous than I would be in describing my involvement here. We have, as a coalition, been studying homelessness for many years. We've talked to experts. Some of us have been to other states to look at programs that that we think work. But more than that, many of us have had personal experience with the homeless, some in our own families, some of our own friends. And so for that reason, a lot of us are very passionate about finding a real solution to this problem. As a result of our talking with the experts and our researching this subject, we have produced this report here, and it describes what we think is the roadmap to having our city address this problem. And if you would like to get that the full document, you can go to the QR code that we have here and on the back of this handout that we've provided. Before I get into the report itself, let me be clear about the population that we're concerned about. It's those individuals who experience a sustained and persistent level of homelessness, who are mentally ill, suffer from drug addiction, are often the ones we're finding committing crime, creating havoc in our neighborhoods. Unfortunately, many of these long-term persistent homeless individuals have burned all their bridges with family and friends and community. And it's hard for them to come back. And so out of concern for them, we have developed a plan that we think can meet their needs. This report describes 3 things that we think need to happen. The first, and I'll go through each of these. The first principle, these are foundational principles of what we think is a successful homeless services system. They are, first, that we offer services that change lives. We reject the notion of housing first. As Scott just mentioned, as Wayne Niederhauser recognizes, a lot of these folks are not ready for housing. And so what we need to do is address the underlying issues that lead to their homelessness. We need to build programs that help people heal. They need housing, but also a structured community environment where they get wraparound services and frankly, the love and support that they need to move down that path towards healing. This report provides several examples. The Haven for Hope in San Antonio, Texas, is a great example. Several of us have been there. Everything about that facility is geared towards changing lives, helping people take the next step towards healing and self-sufficiency. They have something similar to what we would call a resource center, except what they call it is a transformational campus. And so you can see that everything about them is about changing lives. There are similar programs in Utah. The Other Side Academy, Life Start Village, Switchpoint, they all offer this community environment where people get the love and support and encouragement they need to overcome their issues. The First Step House is an excellent program for those with mental illness. And again, they provide housing and all the wraparound services they need. The problem with our current system is that we're focused on housing, building more shelters. But we tend to forget that we're not addressing the underlying need. And so what happens is that as we create these housing facilities, we bring these folks into an apartment, and there's no safety. There's very little in the way of wraparound services. I recently visited one of these facilities. The manager of the facility, I asked her, so how many do you think of your residents are using drugs, illegal drugs? And she said, well, all of them. I saw untreated mental illness. A woman there that I met said that she was sexually assaulted in her apartment. And so what we're thinking is we're taking these folks off the street and giving them an apartment, but it's no more safe than the place they were at. And what we're doing is we're bringing them and all their issues into this building, and there's still all the drug addiction and mental illness and crime and victimization that we had on the street. So we recommend that we prioritize service-rich programs that focus on changing people's lives. If we don't do this and we continue to build these facilities without that structure and safety, you're going to continue to have these hotspots for crime scattered all over our community. And are we really improving things? The second principle is enforce the law. This report shows that wherever we locate these facilities, we see an increase in crime. We'll soon hear from a few residents who have experienced this firsthand. They'll tell you that of the effect that this population has on our neighborhoods. In fact, this report shows that wherever we locate these facilities and wherever there's encampments, you'll see higher rates of crime. And that's why we need more structure, more safety in these facilities. The first thing we'd like to do is see an enforcement of the no camping laws. Homeless encampments are not safe. They are not healthy. There's drug use, drug dealing, prostitution, assault. There's human waste, other garbage. And they attract people who prey on the homeless. For those camping on the streets, our message to them is, in our community, we do not allow people to live this way. We want to tell you that we want to help you progress down that path towards healing and self-sufficiency. But to do that, we need to get you either into a shelter, and for those of you who don't want to live in a shelter, and there's many who refuse to go to the shelter, we will have a sanctioned camp for you to stay at, where we will provide a shower and a toilet and safety, place to store your things, and someone who will engage you and talk about what needs to happen to get you to move down that path towards self-sufficiency. Enforcing the law also requires that we be serious about illegal drug use. In Salt Lake City, and this data is in the report, Salt Lake City has the highest rate, the Salt Lake City Justice Court has the highest rate of repeat offenders in the state. Why is it that we have people coming to our court time and time and time again, and we're not dealing with their issues? We're calling for a broken windows approach to crime in general. That means that we respond to small crime before they escalate into larger, more serious crimes. And to be absolutely clear, we need to enforce the law not because we want to be mean or we want to punish people. It's because we believe that our homeless friends will not progress until they recognize the consequences of their behavior. And quite often, we hear people say that being arrested was the best thing that happened to me because it made me start to look seriously about changing my behavior. So the next thing, third principle, accountability. Everyone involved in the homeless services system needs to be accountable for results. That means we need to be more disciplined about how we provide services. Our police need to be more disciplined. The courts, policymakers, and even the donors who fund these programs need discipline and accountability. Even the homeless themselves need to be accountable. They need to be responsible for taking the steps, for taking advantage of the services we offer them. Here's some examples. If you're a provider of drug rehab services, you ought to know how many of your folks, those who complete your program, return to addiction. How many of them after 2 years are drug-free? If you provide supportive housing, how many of those who leave your facility return to homelessness? How many of them move to a better place, to more independent living? We ought to know these things. If you're a prosecutor or a judge, how many of the people that come before you in court have been there 40 times before? If we track this information, maybe the judges and the prosecutors know how many, and the public know how many times these folks have been through your court. Maybe the 41st time you'll do something a little different. So, also, accountability means this. It means you keep your promises. If you're the operator of a homeless resource center, and you've made a promise to the neighborhood that you're going to prevent your residents from impacting them, then when you see crime increase in that neighborhood because of your residents, you take responsibility for it. That's accountability. Finally, I said accountability also applies to our homeless friends. They need to take responsibility for doing the things they need to do to improve their lives. We can offer all kinds of supportive services, but if they don't take the opportunities, there should be consequences. At the same time, we need to provide them with love and support and encouragement. Let me summarize by saying that we know that homelessness is a very difficult problem. Our hearts go out to those who are homeless. We don't blame the homeless. We don't blame those who have dedicated their lives to providing homeless services. What we are providing is a roadmap which will lead us to a more effective homeless services system, a system that really does help people overcome the obstacles they face to a good, healthy life. So where do we go from here? The Pioneer Park Coalition will be presenting this plan to the Utah Homelessness Council, to the Salt Lake City Council, and to the Salt Lake County Coalition to End Homelessness. Beyond that, we have some specific things we'd like to do. We're going to promote the creation of sanctioned camps and encourage our city to enforce the no camping laws. We will promote a Housing Plus demonstration project that reflects the key elements that we have in this plan. We will sponsor a research study. We've already worked out a plan to do some research with some University of Utah social science researchers to examine the client flow through our homeless services system. And we hope to provide information that will show the gaps in the system, where people are falling out, and hopefully this study will help create a more data-driven, results-oriented homeless services system. And finally, we plan to encourage the operators of our homeless services system to be more accountable, take responsibility for the impacts that they have on their neighborhoods. As I said, you can download the full report from the QR code here. Scott?
Yep.
Thank you.
I think you can all see the value that Jim and his experience brings to the Pioneer Park Coalition, but most important, it brings a new hope for all the homeless. We have 4 more speakers, and we think it's important that you hear them because they are residents and business owners down here. I know you all have deadlines, and they're going to be short, so I'd like to introduce the next speaker. His name's Kyle Arzu. He is the general manager for the the Gardner Apartments, and followed by that is Amy Hawkins. She is the Ballpark Community Council chair. After that, we'll hear from Brian Hill, who is the community council for the Salt Lake Community Council. And then last but not least, Bob Danielson, who owns a business right next door to the Gail Miller shelter. And lives, his house is right there. I forgot about that. So he's a resident and a business. So we'll go in that order. And then we have an announcement that I think you all will want to stick around to hear.
Good morning. My name is Kyle. A little about me. I'm a business owner, real estate manager. Most important of all, though, I'm a resident of the neighborhood. Our community in Pioneer, in the Rio Grande Pioneer Park area, continues to have the challenges that emanate from the persistent lawlessness that is permitted to occur ungoverned. In our most recent bout of vandalism, one of our storefront windows had a rock thrown into the window by an unprovoked individual who was clearly ill, yelling and screaming as he walked up and down the sidewalks. This person was a repeat criminal offender who, even after pressing charges, was released the next day and was at our property, loitering at the front, and we were told nothing could be done to have him removed. That is just one occurrence in a long line of repeated offenses and we've experienced, from repeated vandalism to the property, being broken into, multiple thefts, camping inside of the building and our stairwells, threats made to random people on the streets. The stories go on and on. We're excited to just say that we think the Pioneer Park Coalition has a plan, and hopefully as public and private stakeholders we can come together and implement a lasting solution.
Hello, my name is Amy J. Hawkins. I serve as chair of the Ballpark Community Council, but today I'm speaking as an executive board member of the Pioneer Park Coalition. I've been asked to comment on the impact that unsheltered populations have on neighborhoods like Ballpark. I think the press is well aware of the Ballpark neighborhood's serious and now long-standing disproportionate issues with violent crime. Some of these crimes involve people experiencing homelessness as victims or as perpetrators. Sometimes they involve the criminal elements known to prey on and circulate among the vulnerable. If you read the report, that you'll note per capita, the Ballpark neighborhood experiences 9 times the rate of homicides compared with the whole of Salt Lake City. Yeah, I'll say that again, 9 times the rate of homicides compared to the whole of Salt Lake City. That's astonishing. It's worth noting, too, that some of those murder victims have been people experiencing homelessness themselves. A man shot to death in the middle of the street in Ballpark, another in a tent on the side of the road. But property crime and quality of life issues have taken a toll on our families in Ballpark. My neighbors tell me that when their kids' bikes are stolen over and over again, or they keep finding needles in their yards, or when their 11-year-old is solicited for sex in the middle of the day, they start to seriously question if the neighborhood is the right place for their family. Some of them, deeply invested neighbors who've served on city boards and the Ballpark Area Plan Steering Committee, have already moved away to the suburbs, and I miss them terribly. They brought real joy to my life, especially getting through the pandemic. I don't blame them. They need to prioritize their safety, but this constant barrage of negative interactions adds up over time to this compassion fatigue that none of us want to be feeling. This is a continual negotiation of pressure. The problem is portraying this situation as an either-or. Either I'm compassionate towards people who are going through the extraordinary trials of being unsheltered, the issues of profound mental illness and addiction, or I'm compassionate towards my neighbors who are having to contend with what to tell their children or their dogs eating human waste full of heroin, or who are frustrated that their car windows were shattered again. This should not be an either or. We should be able to help everyone. And wanting a safer neighborhood so young families can stay and return to Ballpark should not be incompatible with social justice and helping those on the street who need it. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Brian Hill. I'm the chair of the Downtown Community Council. As on behalf of the board of the Downtown Community Council, we look forward to further reviewing the details of the grand plan that the Pioneer Park Coalition has introduced. We also look forward to collaborating with them on their efforts. It's heartening that others, the individuals and other groups in our community are continuing to lend their voice to caring for our unsheltered brothers and sisters and to better supporting resource center host neighborhoods. Thank you.
How are you? My name is Bob Danielson, and I'm a resident of this area right here. Actually, my home is right across the street. My balcony faces Pioneer Park, and my business is located right next door to the Gil Miller Center. I'll keep it short and sweet. Since living here, just in this area, while walking my dog, right in Pioneer Park, on no less than 3 occasions, I've had 3 to 4 attempted muggings or robberies. I've had 2 people masturbating in front of me, right there on the corner. And I've witnessed countless, I can't even tell you how many, robberies against homeless individuals and otherwise. The most recent example of that was I just was walking over to get a bottle of wine with my girlfriend. This was about a month and a half ago. Broad daylight, probably about 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and out jumps somebody and tells me to give me all of my stuff. Broad daylight. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. As a resident, as a business owner, it is getting worse. Forget about the statistics for a minute. Whatever they say, they say. Living here, the practical matter is that it's not working, whatever's being done right now. So I embrace what the Pioneer Park Coalition is trying to do right now. Something different. The current homeless industrial complex, as I call it, is not working. Pumping more money into it doesn't solve the problem. It's not compassionate. And something must be done if we're going to take our city back for the residents of this city who have been here a long time and those who are homeless. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of our speakers. And again, thank you for being here. We want to give some time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and we'll take a few minutes here. Everyone is available. They've all agreed to speak if whoever you have a question for. This would be the first time in the history of my political career that I didn't have 10 questions. So, yes?
If you're enforcing no camping laws, but you also don't want to focus on housing as solutions, where do you put the homeless people?
Great question. Jim? Where's Jim?
We think housing is the solution eventually. The notion of getting them off the street is the first. It's like an emergency action. We've got to get that under control. We have the shelters. We do not yet have a sanctioned camp. We may need multiple sanctioned camps, but that's the first step, is to provide that place. But let me tell you, don't get fixated on the sanctioned camps or even the shelters. These things need to be a jumping off point to a better place. The resource centers were never supposed to be a place where people stayed for more than a few months. And we have people there for a year or more. We see a sanctioned camp as serving the same function. They're there for a brief period of time where we then stabilize them and get them so that they can start moving on to a better place. Some of the programs that we've described here, depending on their needs. The problem is we just put them into housing and then we ignore them. That's not the solution. We need to create a pathway, what they like to call a continuum of care. But we got to get people moving along that continuum of care. And eventually, off into some independent setting. Now, some folks, we know they are never going to live fully independently because they have taken drugs, are so mentally ill that they will never be fully independent. But we can't even get them to a better place unless we first get them stabilized into a program where they get the wraparound services and the treatment they need, and then move them on to a better, more stable place. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Richard.
So the sanctioned camp idea, this park is where all the homeless services are located. I mean, around the park, you've got the clinic, you've got the Wiegland Center. Where would the sanctioned camp be where NIMBYism wouldn't just defeat it?
We have not identified a location for that. There have been discussions, let me tell you, at higher levels about where such a place might be located, but there is some state property that is being considered, and we have looked at some other locations. We don't want to identify those yet, but yeah, that's part of the discussion, and we'll get there. Yes, and NIMBYism is a huge problem. And why is it a problem? It's because we create these facilities and we don't provide any security. We provide some security at the resource centers, but you know what? There are a lot of drugs, a lot of chaos going on inside those facilities and outside in the neighborhoods. And until we get that dealt with, let me tell you, anybody who hears that they're going to locate a shelter or a permanent supportive housing or any kind of facility like that in their neighborhood, citywide, they're going to be all up in arms. And rightly so, because these facilities tend to attract a population that's really troublesome.
Well, and NIMBYism was the result of, the result of NIMBYism was that the homeless shelter right here was torn down. Do you believe that was a mistake, and that now what we're seeing is a result partially of the homeless shelter being torn down?
That facility was a disaster. I toured that facility in the middle of the night, and I saw drugs and all kinds of victimization and abuse inside the facility. That was, and it was too big. You've got too many people piled on top of each other. We really needed to get that under control, and spread out. And Scott and I have been talking about, well, maybe having everything in Salt Lake is part of the problem. Maybe we need more shelters outside of Salt Lake. Why not in Draper, in Harriman, in Bountiful, in Provo? Why don't we spread out these facilities and not pile them on? It's the concentration that's been part of the problem, and that was part of the problem with the downtown shelter, was the concentration of all those folks, and they just promote more drug use and more victimization when they're all concentrated together.
So I've asked before about sanctioned, camps, and I haven't really heard a lot of support for that. One thing that Mayor Mendenhall has told me is she thinks that wouldn't provide the dignity for people experiencing homelessness that they deserve. What's your response to that? And have you found any political support anywhere for sanctioned camps?
Well, Katie, preserving the dignity of a homeless person is not having them camp right here and sleep in their own wallow and have people drive by and treat them inhumanely. So the Honorable Mayor needs to know that the sanction camp provides that dignity of safety, security, as well as hopefully some resources. What resource does Bob or Joanne have right here while they're sleeping on this, right here? So I hope that answers the question. Richard, I want to go back to yours real quick. It wasn't a mistake. It was the best thing that we could ever do to tear that shelter down. There was more horrendous, horrible criminal activity in there than you could ever imagine. It was dilapidated. It was a shelter that was just that, a shelter. When you have the family shelter right next to the men's shelter, right next to the women, I was over there a lot of times when the school bus pulled up to drop the kids off. All of a sudden there was this surrounding of men that would get around those. Fortunately, we had bus drivers who would not let the kids out until they gave them a certain pass and then their respective guardian was there. What was a disaster and what was a mistake is that the new shelter operators don't enforce what our conditional permit asks them to do. You cannot have criminals hanging around the shelter. You can't have businesses that are by the shelter that every day they get a window broken, every day they get needles thrown over. They have condoms all over. That's the mistake, is that we did not, and we haven't, and this is squarely on the shoulders of Shelter of the Homeless Board, enforce a zero tolerance, no criminal activity.
But I guess the root of my question is, why would a sanctioned camp be so much better than the former shelter?
Because the resources will be there. We will not allow one to go in until we have safety, security, and discipline within that. And it works. I see Rocky Anderson here. He's been down to Austin, and he's seen Haven for Hope. We've seen these places that work. San Antonio, we know that they work. And so, look, what we're doing now, I was in the legislature 20 years ago. We give more money to homeless than ever before. The Deseret News had an article that said in 2019, I think it was, Katie, I can't remember, that we spent $200 to $300 million. Where's the accountability of that money? You would think for $200 or $300 million, we could take care of every homeless person there is. Now, I want to emphasize one other thing. I have never seen such a defiant group of homeless people in my entire career than dealing with this than recently. They will say to me, it's my constitutional right to sleep here. I can defecate and urinate wherever I want to because you haven't built enough toilets. This is being fed by groups like Nomads and others who really preach that to the very vulnerable homeless. And so we can't make a person go to a sanctioned camp. We can't get them into mental health services. But what we can do is enforce no camping and say, your alternative is to jail or go to the sanctioned camp. And when we talk about jail, I think this reporter right here asked that question. We're talking about a new vision of jails. Oxbow has not been open. We want a receiving center where we can take the most challenged into that. Davis County has a receiving center and a jail. Oftentimes when their security picks people up, they give them the option. Do you want to go to jail or do you want to be in this receiving camp? Where they can get mental health services, where they can get drug addiction help. So that's the vision. Creativity and curiosity will lead the day in changing what's happening in the homeless community.
Scott, how much is it going to cost to implement this whole plan?
Do you want to answer that? Do you want me to? And that's Blake. I think you asked that question, Blake.
Blake, we've talked to Blake about this earlier. There's two ways to look at this. The cost of the system, we're pouring a lot of money into this system. And we keep asking ourselves, how much of this money is spent on people that are just cycling through time and time again, our shelters and our service providers, our courts, and we're not getting any better. What would happen if we spent a little money up front to get them in a better place so they're not here for 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 years going through this experience, costing us in our shelters, in our resource centers, and how many times have people gone through a drug rehab program only to fail? Let's solve the problem and stop spending the money on things that haven't been producing results. There's another thing I've noticed that, let's just take crime. One of the models we have in here is the Other Side Academy. I looked at their outcomes. The people that graduated from that program had 675 offenses collectively over 2 years before they went into the program. I looked at what happened after they got out of the program. It was like 60 offenses. Imagine taking this population and they don't commit any more crime. What's the benefit of that? So if you want to do a cost-benefit analysis, that's something that we would bring into it. I haven't done that. We need to think about, though, the point is we need to think about how much better, how much less expensive would these folks be to us if we got it right, and if we got them the services and help rehabilitate these folks.
So can you do it with existing resources, or do you need more money?
I think up front you're going to need to spend more money on sanctioned camps. But the point is we got to get to a place where people are coming out healthy. Now here's another piece. Can I add this? There's a second. That's the cost-benefit side of things. On the revenue side, we think there is money out there for things that work. When we went to San Antonio, that Haven for Hope, does it come from public money? Not very much. It is mostly private donations. And why is that? It's because people love to donate to things that work. I think we have the same environment here. If we were to start producing programs like that in Utah, where people are coming out healthy, you would see a lot more private money going into our homeless services system. And I don't know that the burden on the taxpayer would be as much as we think it could be, but that people would step up. And I predict that legislators would also want to invest more in things that they know work. Because right now, you go to them and you say, we need $150 million. Well, we're just hoping that it produces results.
When you talk about offering services that change lives, how is that different from what is being done now? Because the resource centers do offer supportive services. The $55 million that was state allocated for permanent housing, that was allocated on the understanding that services would be offered. So how are you?
Yes,
what's different?
there are services available, mostly through Medicaid and that kind of thing. Yes. We're just talking about a whole nother level of intervention.
And let me just answer that question. Blake, to answer that question so everybody understands, the $55 million was put towards affordable housing. They have a scoring sheet up there that says you will do X, Y, and Z, and then we'll reevaluate if you come back and ask for more money. That's the first time we've ever had a data analytic measurement on homeless services. First time. Now, remember, the money has just gone out, so we've got to go build the units, and then we have to make sure that when it goes to the next round of funding, that what you said you would do, you are doing. And so that $55 million we haven't seen the light of day. That's a step that we think we applaud the legislature. But accountability has been lacking in homeless services since I was up there. There is no accountability, zero. Now, they'll say, service providers will say, well, no, we have some because this is how many socks we passed out. This is how many meals we gave. This is how many nights we had in the shelter. No, we want measurements that says, how many people did you get into workforce services, a job, learn a skill? How many did you get into mental health recovery? How many did you get into addiction recovery? And then, what was the outcome of that? That's what we believe is missing. If all of you didn't have a boss and you had no accountability and you said, every day I've done this many stories and you don't have to check on it if you got paid by the story, that doesn't work. There is no oversight or no self-reporting is what happens with our shelters right now on the number of people in the shelter. They self-report. We need accountability in our homeless population. And the reason is to help the homeless.
And I have one follow-up question on that. What exactly do you mean by accountability? If you talk about accountability in the courts, accountability of service providers, if service providers don't keep neighborhoods around them safe, then what? The courts do not follow through, as you say, then what?
We both had the same answer, so I'll let you go.
You know, shining the light of day on what's going on leads to change. It leads people to improve their performance. If you knew at the end of the day that somebody was going to ask you, how many times have you had someone come out of your program and be successfully placed, successfully find housing, and in a more independent place than they are today, and how many people that you had under your purview went back to the streets, that by itself will lead to change, we believe. And it'll lead decision makers, policy makers, citywide, statewide, to take notice and say, what are we going to do? Well, this provider is producing results. Maybe we ought to look closer at their strategy and what they're doing. That's our vision.
And I'll be a little bit more direct, because sometimes I am a little bit more direct. Cancel their contract. They don't get the contract the next year. In the news business, you know that if you're not performing, somebody will cancel the contract one way or the other because you haven't performed. Sorry. Oh, thanks, Bernie.
Yeah, okay.
I love Bernie.
Other questions? You go ahead.
Well, let's take your questions one at a time. The jails are getting more people. Rosie Rivera has done a great job of reaching out. We lowered the age of 8 to 18 that you could work in a jail. The legislature did that last year. So they're getting more personnel. Oxbow is not open. It's a sitting resource that's there. We're not looking for sanctioned camps in every community. What we're looking for is maybe one sanctioned camp that would be in an area that it doesn't have neighbors around it, doesn't have businesses around it, but it has transportation, and it would have the services within it. So I don't want you to get that mixed up, that we're saying we want sanctioned camps in every community. We are saying that Salt Lake City should not bear the brunt of homeless shelters. We are saying that communities like Mill Creek and Murray and others need to look at how they're going to contribute to put in a resource center, not a shelter, not a shelter. Shelter is warehousing people, bringing them in at night, putting them in a cot, and kicking them out at 7 a.m. in the morning. No. That's the things that have been going on for the last 30 years, and they don't work.
If that's all, Scott has an announcement to make regarding the PPC.
So, when the Pioneer Park Coalition was first formed, our whole mission was to make this park a family-friendly park 24/7. That was our objective. Because at the time, as those who've been around a while, you know what happened here. Human trafficking on this corner, drug deals on this one, and about every debauchery you could think of. Well, they had Operation Rio Grande. It came in. It worked for a while, and the Pioneer Park Coalition donated over $300,000 to put lights in the park. Now, the city, and we give all big shout outs to the councils and the mayor, they're going to invest a significant amount of money in this park to make it what it should be, a family-friendly park to everyone. So the Pioneer Park Coalition is evolving, and effective in January, we will move to a new concept within our preview of what we're responsible for, to the Capital City Coalition. Why? That's a good question you should ask. We have had North Temple, we've had Ballpark Community, we've had West Community, Bryan Hills, Yellcrest and Harvard Community Council. The chair is Jan Hemming. In fact, she's here with us today. They've come to us and said, we need help. We don't have a voice. Can we come together and be under one umbrella where we can move mountains? And united we're going to stand, and we will take on homelessness. So you'll see the Pioneer Park Coalition will still be here because Rick Graham, who was the Parks Director for years, over 20 years, he's been asked to serve on that committee to help reinvent this park. But the broader coalition will now move forward. We'll also adopt a new model where we can actually contribute to campaigns and look for those leaders who share the vision of what we can do as a state, a community, and a country to change the face of homelessness. You'll see shortly our new logo, you'll see the things that we have, but we are proud to say that we want to make a difference, and we're willing to go in the trenches, stand tall, and be recognized as that entity that is doing the right things for the right reasons for our homeless. So we're proud to do that. We'll have more information on that, but January 1st, you'll see the Capital City Coalition. With that, I want to thank all of you for coming. We're all press available. I want to thank all the speakers. Thank our chair, Dave Kelly. Thank you to Jan Hemming, who's helped us so much on PR, to our fabulous interns, Spencer, Becca, wherever she is, and to our great friends that have never given up on us. I look at Mike Stransky here. He had a business right over here. Day one, he was out there saying, we have to change things. We can't keep doing this. His business was racked by it. Peggy is on mental health. I mean, I could go through this whole group. These are people who care more about homelessness than they do about their hip pocket. Thank you very much for coming. We'd be available, and if you need anything, just give us a call. Spencer Tierlink is our public relations. Thank you, Spencer, for everything. Thank you, everybody.